To win the Iraq terrorism debate and win the election, Democrats need to run the following ad. Ad start. I will prove to you that the Bush-McCain strategy has caused Americans to die from terrorism in Iraq and caused America to be economically and strategically defeated in Iraq. But the Democratic strategy would have protected Americans from terrorism in Iraq and would have won the economic and strategic war in Iraq. Only the comprehensive Democratic strategy can protect America from terrorism and defeat global terrorism in just 10 years. For proof, visit the Barack Obama website. Ad end. The Barack Obama website must then contain detailed ads like the following. Ad start. I will prove to you that the inferior strategy of Bush-McCain has led to major defeats in Iraq. Only when Bush copied the superior strategies of Democrats did it lead to a limited victory in Iraq. If the superior strategies of Democrats had been used from the beginning, then America would have won a complete victory in Iraq in perhaps 1 year. Thousands of Americans did not have to die in Iraq. Trillions of dollars did not have to be lost in Iraq. A key part of the global war against terrorism is the economic war to keep America economically strong. By losing $1 trillion in Iraq, America has been economically defeated in Iraq. With the inferior strategy of Bush-McCain, the war in Iraq has taken over 5 years, distracting America from fighting the terrorists who attacked America. That delay has been a strategic defeat of America in the global war against terrorism. Thus, the inferior Iraq war strategy of Bush-McCain has led to economic defeat and strategic defeat of America in its global war against terrorism. If the superior Democratic strategy had been used, then America would have won the Iraq War in perhaps 1 year, and thus would have also achieved economic victory and strategic victory in the global war against terrorism. I will prove to you that the Democratic strategy is far superior to the Republican strategy by explaining the keys to winning the global war against terrorism in just 10 years. At the beginning of the war in Iraq, I submitted a plan to win the war in Iraq in just 1 year. I will prove to you that we could have won the war in Iraq in just 1 year by using the ideas of Democratic leaders as well as other good ideas such as my proposals. Realize that the war against terrorism is not a military-only war, but is rather a composite of many wars. The levels of the war from highest to lowest are a core spiritual war for human souls, a psychological war for hearts and minds, an economic war to finance long-term victory, a diplomatic war for national political alignments, a criminal war in small conflicts, a military war in large actions. Also realize that there are multiple levels of each level of the war. For example, the levels of the diplomatic war include international diplomacy of nations, group diplomacy of political factions in the nations, and grassroots diplomacy to win popular support. The key to winning a military war is to effectively work to win the diplomatic war. Diplomacy wins more people to your side so that when the two sides stand on the battlefield, you will have a much larger army, and thus you will win far sooner at far less cost. Thus, the Democratic strategy of also fighting the economic and diplomatic war is far superior. Consider the evidence that the war in Iraq could have been won in just 1 year. Democratic leaders insisted that we use diplomatic efforts with the nations of the world rather than rush to war by ourselves. But using diplomacy to get more allies to help us would have meant that we would have to share the Iraq oil profits with other European nations. That would have meant Halliburton getting a smaller share of the war profits. Perhaps the lives of American soldiers were considered less important than war profits for Halliburton stockholders like Dick Cheney. Democratic leaders like Senator Joe Biden suggested for years that we use diplomacy between the factions in Iraq to reduce the violence in Iraq. As a part of the surge effort, our military formed an alliance with the Sunni forces to help combat terrorists in Iraq. It was the use of diplomacy between factions that is largely responsible for the reduced violence in Iraq. If the ideas of leaders like Joe Biden had been used at the start of the war, then a civil war would have never occurred and thousands of Americans would not have died. At the start of the war in Iraq, my proposal for winning the war in 1 year was to win the hearts and minds of the people in Iraq. That that is a form of grassroots diplomacy. As an inventor of a system of human psychology, I understand how to win the hearts and minds of people. Soon after the invasion of Iraq, America had a great deal of goodwill with the people of Iraq because we ended their dictatorship. If you watch the news clips of the time, you will see that many of the people of Iraq wondered whether America would give them the form of government that they wanted or would rather impose on them a form of government that American big oil wanted them to have. I suggested several things, including the president announcing to the people of Iraq that the people of Iraq would be in charge, not America and American lobbyists. Quickly putting the people of Iraq in charge with a grassroots direct democracy to make all political decisions, including the form of the new government. I said that town hall meetings should be formed to immediately elect leaders at all levels. The levels might include town hall precincts, voting districts, towns, regions, and then the nation. Each level would elect representatives to the next higher level. All decisions would be filtered back down to a direct democracy town hall meeting vote. Then leadership at every level would be elected by the people at the grassroots town hall meetings. Thus, an immediate grassroots town hall direct democracy would allow the people of Iraq to be directly in charge of all immediate political decisions, the form of the new government, and the leaders at all levels. If the people of Iraq had felt empowered and did not believe that America was imposing its will on their nation, then there would not have been an insurgency against the American occupation of Iraq. Iraq could have been a democracy within 1 year and an end to the war in just 1 year. But if the people of Iraq had been in power, they may not have chosen to have Halliburton have no bid contracts on all of their oil work. That would have meant less war profits for Halliburton stock owners like Dick Cheney. Perhaps profits for oil CEOs was more important than immediate democracy in Iraq. Another big mistake that Bush-McCain made was disbanding the Iraq Army. If the Iraq Army had been told that their salary would be based on the amount of oil being produced in Iraq, then oil in Iraq may have actually paid for the war in Iraq. Just another example of how using Democratic Party idea of diplomacy to win a war is a far superior strategy that saves lives, money, and time. Over 5 years of failure in Iraq and the economic and strategic defeat of America in Iraq is not made up for by the limited success of a surge that was 5 years too late to save thousands of American lives. If you want a superior war strategy in the global war against terrorism and you want to protect America from terrorism, then vote Democratic in 2008. Add end.